Hello and welcome back to Echoes in the Mirror. This is a space for exploring the twin flame journey through self-reflection, healing, and ultimately coming into inner union. So today I'm going to be talking to you about the chaser-runner dynamic. I want to note that this dynamic the reason that I'm talking to you about this is because at the end of the day, if you want to heal and you want to come into inner union, it's important to know your wounds and where they come from. So understanding this dynamic that is prominent within the twin flame connection is a big part of that. Awareness is the key. Awareness is pretty much the entire point of the twin flame journey. We come into contact and we trigger each other to awaken each other. And at the end of the day, especially if you're here, it's because you understand that this journey isn't about alignment with your twin. It is about alignment with yourself. Because at the end of the day, your twin flame is your mirror. So that means that they reflect everything that needs to be healed within you and everything that you need to love about you. So let's look at let's get into it. Let's get into the chaser-runner dynamics. I think it's important to note that these dynamics aren't about who loves each other more. At the end of the day, both dynamics are just different fear responses. One person moves towards the connection under stress, and the other one moves away under stress. But both behaviors are meant to protect the individual. It's not a manipulative thing. That is one thing that I want to stress is different between the twin flame journey versus something that is just seemingly or just karmic or I guess toxic. If you listen to the other episodes, you know that I don't believe that the twin flame journey is toxic at all. Again, it's just a fear response. So this dynamic is driven by the nervous system. It's not an intentional thing. And that's something that I feel is so misunderstood when it comes to twin flames and those on the journey. So let's get into it. I'm going to begin with the chaser energy. I am going to assume that most of my listeners identify with the chaser energy. Simply because, obviously, as the chaser, you are more likely to be the one that actually would look for answers, at least early on in the dynamic. The chaser energy typically aligns with an anxious attachment style. So, like I just said, one of the first characteristic when it comes to the chaser is that they are the ones that seek reassurance. They prefer to have closeness and emotional availability. They're highly sensitive to shifts in mood, tone, or distance. Their nervous system feels regulated through contact or communication, and they experience distance as destabilizing. For their emotional patterns, they typically have a fear of abandonment or being left behind. Their anxiety increases when things kind of feel unclear or there are words that just seem like they're unspoken. They have a tendency to kind of ruminate in the past and replay interactions because they have a strong desire to resolve things, to fix it. So how this is expressed through their behavior, this means that they are the ones that are typically the ones who reach out repeatedly for clarity or reassurance. Again, they replay conversations in their head. They get really stuck in the memories. They end up over-investing in emotional energy, and they have difficulty sitting with the uncertainty. So they end up putting their personal needs on hold in order to preserve the closeness. So this means they have the shadow tendency of self-abandonment in pursuit of the connection. They typically over-identify with the relationship, which causes them to lose their sense of self-worth when closeness feels threatened to them. So this all stems from caregivers who were inconsistent, unpredictable, or emotionally unavailable. This means that love felt conditional or tied to performance. They learn from an early age that connections require effort. And so they learn to monitor other people in order to feel safe. So the key thing about the chaser is that they learned that closeness had to be maintained, otherwise it would be lost. Now for the runners. Runners typically align with avoidant or dismissive attachment styles. Their core characteristics are that they seek autonomy, space. They want they rely on themselves for emotional self-sufficiency. They feel the safest when emotional demands are low. They regulate their nervous system through independence. So when they experience intensity, they experience it as pressure, or it might feel like an obligation to them. So they need a lot of distance to kind of balance themselves. And they often value logic over emotional expression. So their emotional patterns are, they have a fear of being consumed, controlled, or being overwhelmed. They have a discomfort with emotional dependency. So even if they desire the connection, they suppress their needs in order to maintain autonomy. They feel guilty about needing the space and struggle to ask for it. So they emotionally shut down when they do feel overwhelmed. So how do they express this? They pull away when there are moments of closeness. They delay their responses, or they minimalize feelings. They avoid having conversations that feel vulnerable in general. And a lot of them typically redirect their energy into work or hobbies pretty much as a distraction. So their shadow tendencies are emotional suppression, confusing detachment, or rather than say detachment, I think they confuse dissociation with strength. For chasers, their childhood roots stem from caregivers that were emotionally distant, overwhelmed, or unavailable altogether, which means that they learn to self-soothe from an early age. Their emotional needs were typically minimized, ignored, or discouraged. So they learned that closeness led to disappointment or intrusion. So the key reflection here is that the runners learned that safety came from not needing anybody. So why are these two dynamics drawn together? Each embodies what the other lacks. The chaser seeks connection externally, and the runner seeks safety internally. So together, they recreate a familiar emotional environment. So looking at it from the mirror perspective. One person fears abandonment and then the other one fears enmeshment. But at the end of the day, both fear vulnerability. Both are just seeking safety. They're just seeking it in opposite directions. So for twin flames, the reason why this dynamic feels so intense is that the early attachment wounds are activated simultaneously. Because of the mirror effect, it exposes unhealed patterns really, really quickly. And then that creates this dynamic just creates meaning because it demands growth. The connection feels really important because, again, it touches survival level fears. So the thing to remember is that this intensity doesn't equal alignment, it's activation. And activation does not equate to union. And that's, again, why I have this podcast and what this journey, it's the understanding that this journey is about how you've been activated, and now it's about understanding these things within yourself and moving yourself into balance. So what attachment style is that? That would be the secure attachment style. So for a chaser to come into balance, it looks like less urgency around the reassurance. They have more of an ability to self-soothe without external reassurance. They get a stronger sense of self separate from the relationship. And then they have an ability to tolerate space without panic. So I guess the way that you can reframe this for yourself is to say that I can be connected without losing myself. For the runner to come into balance, they need a greater tolerance for emotional presence. They need to have the ability to stay engaged during vulnerability and less need to disappear when they're triggered. They just need to realize that closeness doesn't erase autonomy. So the way that they can internally reframe is by saying, I can stay without being consumed. So what does a secure attachment look like? It looks like comfort with both closeness and space. Emotional needs would be expressed without fear. Independence and intimacy can coexist. And the connection just feels chosen and it doesn't feel like something that's necessary. So secure attachment would often feel calm, which after so much chaos can kind of feel unfamiliar. So the chaser-runner dynamic dissolves when the roles stop providing relief at all. The nervous system doesn't need these patterns. The relationship either would stabilize or it naturally ends. So again, the whole reason why I have this podcast is because I think a lot of people on this journey just kind of don't see that the whole reason that we're on this journey is to heal. And it's not about pursuing this connection and trying to make sure that you come into union with the other person. At the end of the day, it's about coming into balance with yourself. And if union happens as a result of that, that is just a cherry on top. So from my personal experience, I have actually experienced both dynamics. If you've been on this journey long enough, you probably have looked in, and if you've looked into it as much, you probably know that there what can happen is that the dynamic shifts, or the roles kind of swap. So in the beginning, I actually think I started out as the runner. And I think because of the relationships that I had in between the first time I came into contact with my twin flame and I'm going to call it reunion, I was in two different codependent relationships. So I think naturally it kind of brought out more of the chaser in me, or more of the anxious attachment style. But as a kid, I definitely had bouts of both from my parents. My parents were pretty emotionally distanced. They were socially unavailable. So naturally, I did actually learn to self-soothe early. Also, I was an only child, at least in the house. So I was always pretty comfortable being by myself. And I think I just think not just having parents that made love feel conditional, but also having partners that made my love feel conditional kind of just exacerbated that. So once I did come back together with my twin flame, I was definitely the one that felt like I had to be the one to initiate and make sure that the connection was going. Otherwise, it felt like it wasn't existent. And especially, because this connection just feels so faded. And okay, let me take that back, because in a sense it is faded. It is definitely divinely guided to happen, specifically so that it triggers a spiritual awakening. And for myself, for my part of the journey, a big thing was being able to trust my intuition and to trust that I wasn't crazy. I think this is very common in a lot of the chasers specifically, is this feeling of feeling like you're crazy in how you're acting and in how you feel about this connection. At the end of the day, no one can tell you what your connection is to you. Only you know. And there is no amount of external validation that can tell you otherwise or tell you anything at all. And learning to trust yourself is a really big thing in this. That and, understanding that the silence doesn't mean that the other person doesn't feel the same way. But again, at the end of the day, we're meant to look at ourselves. We're not meant to look at how the other person's healing. It's all about how you're healing. And if you're constantly checking in on your person, or you're constantly looking for that reassurance that your person's going to wake up and understand, or wake up to the connection and then come back towards you, is completely missing the point. What's the point of your person coming back to you if you just need to be dependent on them? If they get triggered again and they leave again, it's going to leave you on shambles. What was the point? If you really want to be able to keep that connection, or just keep any connection in general, you have to work on the things that your mirror triggered in you. And you have to recognize that the things that you love about your twin are really the things that you want for yourself. At the end of the day, it really is all about the balance, and it really is all about not even feeling like you need the connection, that you're able to trust not just in yourself, but in the divine to bringing you somebody who matches that balance in you. And of course, the hope is that it's your twin flame and that they also come into balance simultaneously. Personally, I do believe that if you are doing the work, that they simultaneously feel the pull. But it's also about remembering that you guys go at we're mirrors, we're opposites in all ways. I think for myself, I think I come to these understandings really quickly, and I recognize that it's going to take my twin longer to get to these realizations, and it might take them longer to actually come into balance with themselves. Because again, so at the beginning, I said that it's more likely that if you're listening to this, you're probably the chaser, because something that the chaser does is they seek validation. They need this reassurance. They need the reassurance of what this connection is, and just for answers in general, whereas the runner is more likely to ignore the connection altogether for a certain period of time. But again, because of the magnitude of this relationship or this connection, and that magnetic pull, the undeniable otherworldly pull towards the other person, eventually there's going to come a point where they're not able anymore to put that distance or ignore the connection for themselves. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to admit this to you, but there is going to be points where they have to kind of understand what it is for themselves, why they can't stop thinking about you. Because again, if this is a true twin flame connection, that means that there is a level of them recognizing the intensity and wanting to at least understand it for themselves. Like I said before when I was talking about the characteristics, they like to intellectualize. So there will come a point where, because they can't shake because they can't shake the feeling or the thought of you, that they will probably look into things to try to understand it a little bit for themselves. That doesn't necessarily mean, though, that they're going to be able to come across the terms. I believe that the runners tend to be more of the masculine energy. And to be fair, I don't think I don't think a lot of the masculines look at these spiritual things as much as we do. I don't think they end up looking for tarot readings and all of these things. But again, this doesn't have to be tied to gender, and it truly can go both ways. I'm sure that there's a lot of people who enter this dynamic that both sides don't look into divinity and understand that it's a spiritual awakening at all. Like I had just mentioned, I had a former friend that I'm 99.9% sure experienced this dynamic. And yeah, right now she is not in a relationship with her twin flame. She's in a relationship with somebody else. And I think that relationship right now, at least, it seems like a soulmate connection, and it seems like something that's meant to heal her and something that is meant to give her what she needs to understand that she can stay, and that she doesn't have to pull away, and she doesn't have to feel unsafe in something, that it's something that can last. And yeah, it's so interesting how this works, how we experience relationships with other people kind of in order to either prepare ourselves for our twin flame, or again, just further put us into balance with ourselves. And I just think what's so special about having a twin flame is just the fact that this person is a direct mirror. This person is a direct look at all your core wounds. They're your parallel. All of this to say that at the end of the day, this connection is really a blessing. It's meant for you to really, truly find yourself and to love that version of yourself, to become the best version of yourself. And, to use that to help heal the world, to be the greatest version of yourself and to give to others. So, thank you so much for listening. I really hope you found this insightful. And until next time, goodbye.